They say families are supposed to protect each other, but what happens when the people closest to you are the ones who break you the most? The day my daughter came running home barefoot, sobbing and covered in dust, my heart sank before she even reached the porch. And when I turned to my mother, for some kind of comfort or explanation, all she said was, she had it coming. That was the moment I knew something had shattered, something I hadn't seen clearly until now. But before I dive into this story, let me ask, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. I always love seeing how far these stories travel and who they reach. Okay, let me take you back to where it began. It was one of those quiet Thursday afternoons where the sky looked like it couldn't decide between raining or just brooding all day. I was in the kitchen stirring a pot of stew, window cracked open, letting in the faint hum of wind through the pine trees. My daughter, Leela, had gone down the street to see my mom, her grandmother. It wasn't unusual. They'd always been close, or so I thought. My mother lived just 5 blocks away in the same house I'd grown up in. A creaky old thing with chipped paint, a porch swing that moaned every time it moved, and hydrangeas she never bothered to trim. Leela had just turned 16, bright-eyed, a little headstrong, always full of plans. She was saving up for her first car, working part-time after school, and doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. She wanted freedom, independence, and I wanted to help her get there. What I didn't know that day was that Leela had brought something valuable with her, an envelope filled with cash. She had been hiding it in a tin box beneath her bed. All her savings from the past 8 months. I didn't even know she'd taken it with her to Grandma's, but later she'd tell me she just wanted to show it to her, to share her excitement, to ask her opinion on a used Civic she'd found listed online. That was the last time I saw Leela truly smile that day. When she burst through our front door, barefoot, her eyes red and puffy, my heart seized. "Mama," she cried, she said I was ungrateful, that I didn't deserve any of it. I rushed to her, pulling her into my arms, feeling her body tremble. Her socks were torn, her feet scraped and dirty, like she'd run through gravel and didn't stop once. "What happened, baby? Talk to me." She told me everything in gasps and tears, how she'd shown Grandma the envelope, full of carefully folded 20s and 10s. How at first, my mom had smiled and nodded, and then her face changed. She said it wasn't safe for me to keep that much money, Layla said. She told me to let her hold onto it until I needed it. I said no. I said it was mine. And then, she took it. She literally grabbed it out of my hands, and when I tried to get it back, she shoved me out the door, locked it behind me. I kept knocking, crying. She told me to go home. I was stunned. Not my mother. My mother was tough, sure, sharp-tongued, never one for hugs or warmth, but I never imagined she would do this. Not to her granddaughter. Still, I needed to hear it from her. I told Leela to stay inside, wash up, rest. I drove to my mother's house, heart pounding with fury and disbelief. She opened the door like she had been expecting me. She had it coming, she said before I could even speak. What? She pranced in here, acting like she'd conquered the world with a couple $100. Thought she was better than me, I suppose. Thought she didn't need anyone. She was proud, I snapped. She was excited. She's a child, my mother said coldly, and children don't get to talk back. They don't get to tell adults what's theirs. I taught her a lesson. I stared at her, realizing then that she didn't just take Leela's money, she wanted to remind her who held the power. And in doing that, she reminded me of every silent betrayal I had buried over the years. The way she controlled, criticized, undermined. I had ignored it, learned to manage it. But now it wasn't just about me, it was about my daughter. Give it back, I said, my voice shaking. It's gone. What do you mean, it's gone? I needed it. For what? Does it matter, she said. I raised you, didn't I? Fed you, clothed you. You think the world owes you kindness now? You should be thanking me. I turned and left before I said something I couldn't take back. I could feel her eyes on my back, but I didn't care. Something had broken beyond repair. That night, I sat beside Leela in her room. She hadn't eaten much. Her tin box sat empty beside her bed, lid open like a wound. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I whispered. She didn't cry anymore, just looked at me and said I trusted her. I knew what she meant. I did too. But that moment was the beginning of something else. Not just betrayal, but a decision. I couldn't change the past, couldn't force my mother to be someone she never was, but I could protect Leela. I could teach her that standing up for yourself isn't about winning, it's about not letting someone make you feel small. And I would make it right. One way or another. The next morning the house was quiet, too quiet, you know the kind where even the floorboards seem hesitant to creak. Leela didn't come down for breakfast. I didn't blame her. The hurt wasn't just in the lost money, it was in what that loss meant. A crack in the foundation of trust. A painful confirmation that someone she loved didn't feel the same way back. I made her favorite, eggs over easy with sort of toast and strawberries, but when I brought the plate up to her room, she just shook her head and rolled away from me under the blankets. Her silence wasn't angry, it was worse. It was hollow. I sat on the edge of her bed for a while, hoping she'd say something. When she didn't, I placed the plate on her nightstand and whispered, "You don't have to talk. Just, I'm here." Downstairs I paced, my hands trembled. I was never the type to stir conflict, but I couldn't let this go. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about principle. About teaching my daughter that she deserved to be treated with respect, even from family. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Uncle Joe, my mom's brother. We hadn't spoken in a long while, mostly because he'd moved states away and kept to himself. But he was the only person who might understand. He answered after 3 rings. "Claire, wow, I didn't expect to hear from you." I hesitated. I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't serious. I told him everything, the money, my mom's reaction, Leila's devastation. There was a long silence on the other end. "She hasn't changed," he finally said. "You're not surprised?" "I'm sorry, Claire, I'm really sorry. I tried to warn you years ago. She did the same to me once. Took money from my college savings, said I was being selfish for wanting to leave." A chill ran through me. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" "I didn't think it would help. You always tried so hard to see the good in her, and I get it. You were her daughter. I was just the one who ran." I rubbed my eyes, tears stinging. "What do I do now?" "She says the money's gone." "She's lying," he said. "She doesn't spend money, she hoards it. If she took it, it's somewhere in that house." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my uncle's words, about all the times Mom had manipulated conversations, made me feel like a burden when I asked for help, shamed me for things she'd quietly sabotaged. I remembered my high school art scholarship, the one I was so excited about. I'd gotten a full ride to an art school in Chicago. I was just 17. My mom told me the school was a scam, that she'd done the research. She showed me a letter, an official notice from some agency warning of fraud. I cried for days, gave up the offer. Years later, I realized the letter had never come in the mail. She had typed it herself. I had buried that memory, buried so many like it. Until now. The next day, I drove back to her house. This time, I didn't ring the doorbell. I knocked hard, 3 times. She opened the door in a housecoat, mug in hand, as if nothing had happened. "Back again?" she said, unfazed. "I'm not here to argue." "Good, because you lose." I stepped inside before she could stop me. The house smelled like must and old perfume. Same faded carpet, same chipped photographs on the walls. I headed straight for the hall closet. She started to protest, but I turned to her and said, "I know you kept it. I'm not leaving until I find it." She folded her arms and leaned against the wall. "Suit yourself." I checked the closet, the pantry, under the stairs, her old sewing cabinet. Nothing. Every drawer, every creaky shelf, every dusty box. And then I noticed something behind the fake potted plant near the hallway mirror, a narrow wooden panel, barely visible. I reached behind it and felt a small latch. It popped open with a dry click. Inside was a narrow hollow, lined with envelopes, folded paper, jewelry boxes, and yes, Leila's tin box. I pulled it out slowly, holding it in both hands. My breath caught. My mother didn't move. She just sipped her coffee and said, "That's mine." "No," I said quietly, "it's not. None of this is." She laughed once. "You think you're some kind of hero now." "I think I'm a mother," I replied, my voice calm but fierce. "And I won't let you do to her what you did to me." That broke the mask. For the first time, her face tightened, not in anger, but in something almost like fear, or maybe regret. I didn't wait to find out. I left, drove straight home. When I walked in the front door and saw Leela sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, I held out the tin box. She blinked. "You got it." I nodded. She took it like it was made of glass, opened it, counted the bills, then looked up at me. "All of it's here." I pulled her into a hug. She clung to me in a way she hadn't since she was little. I didn't know what came next, whether I'd ever speak to my mother again, whether she'd try to twist this around like she always had, but one thing was clear: we weren't her anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something better. The morning after I returned the money, Leela seemed lighter. Not her usual self, not completely, but lighter. She actually came down for breakfast and ate quietly at the table, her eyes still a little guarded, but the hurt no longer consuming her. She thanked me, not just for getting the money back, but in that way kids do when they don't quite have the words yet. It was in the way she lingered in the kitchen, in the way she set her empty plate in the sink and gently bumped her shoulder against mine before going upstairs. That unspoken kind of thank you. But beneath the calm, I felt something bubbling in me. A quiet rage that had been waiting decades to fully arrive. You spend your whole life giving people like my mother excuses. You tell yourself she had a hard life. Or she did the best she could. You bury the bruises that aren't physical, the kind that live in your memory, the kind that creep into how you raise your own children, no matter how hard you try not to let them. I stood at the kitchen window watching the trees sway in the wind, and all I could think was, it's time to stop burying it. That afternoon I made a decision. I wrote everything down. All of it, not just what she did to Leela, but what she'd done to me. The fake letter that ended my scholarship dreams. The time she lost the check I earned from my high school tutoring job. The fact that when my father died, she didn't even tell me about the life insurance payout. She kept every penny. I wrote it all. Page after page, my handwriting turning jagged as the memories spilled out. And when I was done, I printed a copy for myself, and one for my Uncle Joe. Then I made one final call, to a lawyer, not to sue her. I wasn't looking for money, it was for clarity. "Can someone legally take money from a minor without consent?" I asked. The lawyer paused, then asked me to explain. Once I told her what happened, she said, "Technically, no. Especially if the minor earned it herself. If the grandmother is not a legal guardian, and there's proof of coercion or theft, it could be considered unlawful possession or even theft, depending on the value." I thanked her and hung up. It wasn't about pressing charges, it was about knowing we weren't crazy. That what happened wasn't just family drama or a lesson learned. It was wrong. Later that evening, Leela sat at the table flipping through car listings again. The excitement was back in her voice, but she was more cautious now, more thoughtful. "I want to find something reliable," she said, scrolling, "not just something that looks cool." I smiled. "You're already smarter than I was at your age." She looked up. "Do you think she'll try to come here, Grandma?" I took a breath. "I don't know. But if she does, it won't open the door." Leela nodded slowly. "I don't hate her, you know." "I know. I feel like I don't know who she is anymore." That hit me hard, because I understood it in a way only a daughter could. "She's always been who she is," I said gently. "But you're starting to see her clearly now. That's painful, but it's also powerful." The next week passed quietly, no calls, no messages, until Friday. I was out in the garden, trimming the lavender bushes, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up, and there she was, my mother. Same iron blouse, same purse she'd had since 2005, but something about her looked different. Her eyes were heavy, her mouth set in something between guilt and defiance. "I just came to talk," she said. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on my jeans. "Talk about what?" She hesitated. "You didn't have to take it that far, dragging Joe into it, calling a lawyer." "I didn't call a lawyer to hurt you. I called because you hurt Leela, and me. And you keep pretending like it's normal." She was being reckless. She was being a kid, a proud, hardworking, honest kid. And you humiliated her, you stole from her. And you don't even seem sorry. That finally got through. Her jaw twitched. Her hand gripped her purse tighter. "I was trying to teach her responsibility." "No, you were trying to control her, just like you tried to control me." Her voice dropped. "I gave you everything. No, you gave me fear, shame, and a version of love that always came with strings. We stood there in silence. She looked past me toward the house. She's a good girl. She is. I didn't mean to break anything. But you did. And you don't get to decide when or how it gets fixed. My mother nodded slowly, then took a step back. I'll go. But for what it's worth. I did what I knew. I watched her walk away, her footsteps slower than I remembered, and for the first time I didn't feel anger anymore. I just felt done. Later, Leela asked me if I would ever forgive her. I said maybe, one day. But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. And neither of us would forget. But from that point on, we were different. Not broken, not bitter. Just clearer, stronger, and for the first time in a long time free. That Saturday morning the air felt softer somehow. The sky was overcast, but not gloomy, just peaceful. Layla and I had planned to visit a used car dealership across town. She wore her favorite denim jacket and had her hair tied back in a ponytail, a look I always thought made her seem older than 16. But that morning, I saw more than age. I saw grace. I saw quiet resilience. The events of the past 2 weeks hadn't broken her. They'd shaped her. As we drove, she reached over and turned the radio down. Mom, she said, if you had told me 2 weeks ago that Grandma would do something like that, I wouldn't have believed you. I glanced at her. I know. I wanted to protect you from seeing that part of her, but maybe that wasn't the right way to protect you. She looked out the window. I don't think I want to see her again. At least not for a while. You don't have to, I said. You're allowed to draw your own lines. You get to decide who you let close. It wasn't until I said those words that I realized they applied to me too. We pulled into the dealership lot, and Leela practically bounced out of the car. It was the first time in days I saw her truly excited. She hovered around a used silver Honda Civic with a slightly faded bumper and a small scratch on the driver's side. But when the salesman handed her the keys for a test drive, she looked at me like it was the biggest moment of her life. She drove carefully, both hands on the wheel, eyes wide with focus. She didn't say much until we pulled back into the lot. I like it, she said, almost surprised at herself. It's not flashy, but it feels like mine. We finalized the paperwork that afternoon. She handed over her envelope of cash with both pride and nervousness. When the keys were finally hers, she opened the car door and paused. I want to drive home, she said. I smiled. Go ahead. I followed her down the familiar streets, watching from my own car as she navigated the curves and stop signs with a kind of maturity I hadn't seen in her before. And when she pulled into our driveway and stepped out, she turned to me with a grin I hadn't seen since before everything happened. That night she went to bed early, exhausted in the best kind of way. I stayed downstairs a little longer, curled up on the couch with an old photo album. Flipping through the pages, I saw my own teenage face, smiling beside my mother in our living room. We looked happy. And maybe we were in the way children can be before they start understanding the things that aren't said. The doorbell rang just before 10. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find a manila envelope lying on the porch. No note, no knock, just left quietly. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from my mother. It read, "Greater than Claire. Greater than I know you don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking about what you said. About control. About shame. About strings. Greater than you were right. I never knew how to love without holding something back for myself. I was afraid you'd leave, succeed, forget me. I saw your daughter's pride, and it reminded me of everything I had tried to bury. Greater than I can't undo what I did, to her, or to you. But I want you to know I'm sorry. I really am. Greater than I'll leave you both alone. I won't try to force my way back. But if one day you decide you're ready to talk, I'll be here. Greater than Mom." I read the letter twice. Part of me felt angry. Another part relieved. It wasn't everything, and it didn't erase the past, but it was something. A thread of humility I had never expected from her. I folded the letter and put it in the drawer. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe someday I'd show it to Leela, or maybe I'd just let it be a quiet closing of a chapter. The next morning, I found Leela sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea and scrolling through her phone. She looked up. "Hey, Mom. Yeah? You think maybe this summer I could take a weekend job at the bookstore?" Start saving again? I smiled. I think that sounds perfect. She nodded, then added, but this time, I'll keep my savings in the bank. I laughed softly. Good idea. We didn't talk about Grandma that day, or the letter, or the hurt. We just moved forward. Not because we forgot, but because we had chosen not to stay stuck. In the end, the betrayal had cracked something open, but it also let the light in. It showed us who we were, and more importantly, who we didn't want to become. And that, I realized, was the real inheritance I could give my daughter, the freedom to choose a better way forward. Not barefoot, not afraid, but sure of herself, and never again ashamed of what she deserves.